All righty. How is everybody doing on September the 1st? Wow. September the 1st, that means fall's coming. How exciting is that? Fall is coming. Well, it's good to be here. It is good to see you here. As I've said the last couple of weeks during class, and as I said this morning before my lesson, that we will start with new material on the first Sunday in October, the Providence of God, and I'm looking forward to that study. But we have 3 classes to finish here. We'll finish those today and the 4th and 5th Sunday. And I will be away the next 2 Sundays, and so we'll have a substitute teacher there. And so let's finish up then. We're in lesson 24 of 26. If you are doing the notebooks, that's page 144 in your handouts. Your God statement for the book of Daniel. Daniel, we not too long ago did a systematic study through the book of Daniel. But the God statement at the beginning of your handout is, the 3 blanks there are the God who protects, discloses, and rules. The God who protects, discloses, and rules. The book of Daniel is a great book. It's an interesting book. One of the reasons it's so interesting is because there's 2 halves that are so different. It is a mixture. It's a mixture of some of the best known parts of all of the Bible. And it is also contains some of the least known parts of the Bible. And some of the best known parts are even familiar to people who don't know much about the Bible. They haven't spent much time in the Bible. They haven't spent much time in church. But almost everybody has heard of Daniel and the lion's den. I mean, almost everybody. Even a lot of people have heard of the fiery furnace episode. The 3 people cast in the fiery furnace. And the whole handwriting on the wall episode. Because one of our familiar idioms in the English language, the handwriting's on the wall, comes from the book of Daniel. Because the handwriting was on the wall. And it meant, this is going to happen. And so that's what our idiom means. And so it is a book with such familiar parts and such unfamiliar parts. Well, the Daniel as the name means God is my judge. He's one of the few characters in the Bible that nothing negative is ever written about him. Nothing. Now, that doesn't mean there wasn't anything negative about him. He's a human being. And if God would have wanted to, God could have spilled the beans on Daniel just like he does on Abraham and Noah and David and all of these great giants of faith who still are imperfect and who have feet of clay. Daniel also would certainly have feet of clay, even though there's nothing negative said about him. He was a man of faith. He was a man of prayer. He was a man of courage, of conscience. He refused to compromise. And what you will read in Daniel chapter 10, he's described by an angel of God, is, if you got the ESV, he's called greatly loved. And if you've got like the New American Standard like I do, he's described as a man of high esteem. And so he's one of the great men of Scripture. And you'll actually find his name even referenced in the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel was a contemporary of Daniel's, and 3 times in the book of Ezekiel he is mentioned as a man of wisdom and righteousness. And so Daniel was a great man of faith. Well, like Esther, we talked about Esther, and we said one of the unique facts about Esther is it's one of the books that takes place outside of the Promised Land. Because she lived outside of the Promised Land. And the book of Daniel was the same. Daniel lived outside of the Promised Land. Daniel lived in exile when Nebuchadnezzar became master of the world, and he defeated this coalition between the Egyptians in about 606, 605 BC. The Egyptians and what remained of the Assyrian Empire, that was the end. At that moment, that was the end of the Assyrian Empire. And Babylon then, of course, became the master of the ancient Near East. Nebuchadnezzar then became the king of Babylon. And one of the things that he did as he pressed southward then into the region of Judah where God's people were, he set up a puppet on the throne, Jehoiakim, and he started taking some people into exile. Now, there's going to be 3 deportations of the people of Judah into exile. 3. Daniel's a part of that first group, the first group of hostages. And he's, we know him, we know his 3 friends. Their Hebrew names are mentioned in Scripture, but we don't remember them by their Hebrew names at all. If I were to go, you remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and you would go, huh? No, not who are they? But if I tell you their Babylonian names, you remember them, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. Those were their Babylonian names that they were given when they were taken back to Babylon. Daniel, though, we don't really know him by his Babylonian name, which was Belteshazzar. All of them are named after, once they get to Babylon, they're given these names after Babylonian gods. But we just know Daniel by his Hebrew name. Daniel, God is my judge. And so he's in exile. He's part of that first group, these young men who are very gifted, that the Babylonians recognize have great potential. And they are going to train them for positions in the royal administration. And so that's what they do. And so Daniel serves not only Nebuchadnezzar's administration, he serves Belshazzar's administration. And then when the Persians destroy the Babylonians, then Daniel is going to serve Darius the Mede's administration as well. And so Daniel has a pretty lengthy service record to, first of all, the Babylonians, and second of all, the Persians. And so Daniel is an interesting, just such an interesting book because it, again, documents a certain aspect of life outside of the Promised Land. Another interesting thing about the book of Daniel, it's written in 2 languages. And there's no other parts of the Old Testament that uses Aramaic to the extent that the book of Daniel does. There's a couple of places where a couple of words are in Aramaic, but that's about it, and a verse here or there. But Daniel's like half Aramaic and half Hebrew. And the reason is Aramaic is the official language of the Persian Empire. And so it's kind of like the international language of things in Daniel's day. And of course, Hebrew is the language of Judea, the Jews. And so when Daniel is speaking of God's people, he uses Hebrew. And when he's speaking about the Gentile nations, he uses the Aramaic, the international language of Aramaic. And so it's pretty interesting that Daniel is kind of like half Aramaic and half Hebrew. There are 2 natural divisions in the book of Daniel as we kind of think about how the book is structured. And the first 6 chapters are mostly written in narrative stories. And these are the parts that are well known because, stories are great to read. They're memorable. They are, everybody likes narrative. And then you begin in chapter 7 all the way through chapter 12, and it's not really narrative. It's pretty much prophecy. And so you got narrative in first 6 chapters. The last 6 chapters is basically prophecy. The first 6 chapters we'll call Daniel's life. And again, this is the easy to understand part of Daniel. And then the second part we're going to call Daniel's visions. And that's the hard part. The easy part, the first 6 chapters, again, Bible, all Bible students love looking at the first 6 chapters of Daniel. The hard part, the last 6 chapters, those are really sadly neglected, even among God's people. Even a lot of adult Bible classes, we'll do Daniel, we'll look at the first 6 chapters. And they don't spend much time at all in the last 6 chapters because, again, it's prophecy and it can be very difficult. So with that in mind, let's take a look at just kind of summarize these, each of these 2 parts. So the first 6 chapters, Daniel's life. Again, we've got the deportation. Daniel, as I said, is part of the first of 3 groups. He's given the name of a Babylonian god. I've already said that, Belteshazzar. And this is what chapter 1 is all about. Now, they didn't apparently object to their new name. Listen, there's not much they can do about it. I mean, their overlords give them a new name and call them by that name. And, it is what it is. But when it came to their diet, that was different. Because when it came to the diet, God had some very strict dietary laws for his covenant people. And so they were not going to violate the covenant when it came to that. They were going to be faithful to God when it came to their diet. And as a result of their faithfulness, God blessed them. They're faithful to God. God blesses their faithfulness. He gifts them with influence. He gifts them with skills. And so obviously then that's why Daniel rises to such positions of influence, not only in Babylonian administrations, but also in Persian administrations because of loyalty to the covenant. Well, then we get into chapter 2, and if there's any mysterious part of the book, it's kind of this part, but it's not all mystery, but there's some parts that are a little hard to understand, but it's pretty straightforward. There's this dream, Nebuchadnezzar has this dream of a monster statue, and basically it's, Nebuchadnezzar wakes up and goes, he's troubled by this, and he calls all of his wise men together and says, you tell me what I dreamed, because he forgot. Have you ever done that? I'm sure you have. We all do that. I never remember a dream. I mean, it's almost 99% of the time I don't remember dreams. And even if I wake up in the middle of the night and go, oh, that was weird, I'm going to remember that in the morning. Morning comes around, I forgot it. So, so he wakes up, he knows he had this wild and crazy dream, but he can't remember it. And so he calls his wise men, tell me what I dreamed and tell me what it means. And if you can't, I'm going to kill you. Well, nobody can do that except who? Who? God. Except God. And anyone God reveals it to, which means Daniel. So Daniel's able to tell the king what it is. And of course, what it basically depicts is 4 kingdoms. There's going to be 4 kingdoms, including Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom. And then there's going to be another kingdom that is going to rise that succeeds these other 4 kingdoms. And this kingdom that's going to arise, it is never, ever, ever going to be destroyed. Now, of course, that kingdom belongs to who? Who? God. That's God's kingdom. The kingdom that's never going to be destroyed is going to be God's kingdom. And so, God is revealing the future here, and it's also revealing the fact that God is going to triumph. God does triumph. He triumphs effortlessly. Then we come to chapter 3. That's the famous story of the fiery furnace. And we all know about that, the giant gold-covered statue. And, when the state band plays, everybody has to bow down to it. And again, you've got these friends of Daniel who are also very gifted and very skilled and that God has blessed. And they're not going to do it. They won't do that. And so, they're tossed into the fiery furnace. And they say, look, God can deliver us, but, whether he does or whether he doesn't, he can. We know that. And he's worth serving. And so we're going to serve him. And so, of course, God does rescue him. And the results is that one of the things is that Nebuchadnezzar makes the declaration that, wow, nobody can deliver like this except your God. Nobody can do that. Then we come to chapter 4. And that's the story about Nebuchadnezzar going crazy. And, and the reason was he refused to recognize that God alone gives kings power. And so Daniel warns the king, hey, listen, if you don't give God credit, and you don't recognize that my God is the one who hands kingdoms to men, then you're going to become as unknowing as a beast. Well, the king refuses, and the king suffers the consequences. And there he is, just like a beast of the field, until the moment that he confesses that God lives forever, God rules forever, and he rules justly. Only then does he regain his senses. Then we come to the 5th chapter of this first section, Daniel's life, and it's the story of the end of Babylon. The interesting thing about this, kind of from a historical perspective, and in terms of a historical perspective of biblical accuracy, is Belshazzar here is the king at this time. But for the longest time, scholars knew that there was no Belshazzar, who is the king of Babylon. That when this supposedly happened, the king was a man by the name of Nabonidus. And so, that was one of the favorite places that Bible critics could point to and say, you see, the Bible made a historical blunder. And then eventually, as is always the case, the sands of the desert gave up some secrets. And scholars found out that Nabonidus had a son named Belshazzar. And that Nabonidus, at that period of time, at the end of the kingdom, he had some other interests that took him away from the kingdom. And since he was gone, his son ruled the kingdom in his place. And so it's perfectly legitimate then to call Belshazzar the king. And by the way, Daniel was promised, because of his ability to interpret what's happening here, that he would be the third in the kingdom. See, that's important too. Because why not second in the kingdom? Like, Joseph. It was because Belshazzar was number 2. And so he couldn't promise Daniel number 2. He would be displaced. Daniel would be number 3 because his father was Nabonidus. So anyway, big party happens. Belshazzar brings out all of the vessels from the temple in Jerusalem that had been destroyed in 586. And they are drinking and partying out of the vessels from the temple of Yahweh. And as they're doing it, they're drinking to the gods of silver and gold and bronze and iron and wood. And Nebuchadnezzar Belshazzar is so arrogant. And this hand appears and writes this very cryptic message on the wall. And basically what it says, Daniel goes, third in the kingdom don't help me, because what it says is, time's up for you. Your reign's over. You don't measure up. Your kingdom's divided. And that very night, the Persians came in, destroyed them. And so it cost Belshazzar his life and kingdom. And then we get to chapter 6, the last part of the first part, the last chapter of the first part of Daniel. And, of course, it's hands down the most well-known part. This is where you have the whole Daniel in the lion's den kind of thing, event happening. And again, you've got Daniel's, his colleagues are jealous. They don't like his rise to power. They want to block it. And so they concoct this plan that anybody who doesn't, pray to the emperor is going to die. And Daniel's not going to compromise on that. And so he's still going to go about his business of praying, going to his room and opening the window and praying toward Jerusalem. And just like in chapter 1, all of his life, he's committed to the covenant of God. And he's not about to do anything that would acknowledge that there is someone above God. And so he's, of course, tossed in the lion's den because of his disobedience. And God sends an angel and rescues him from the lion's den. So that's the first part of the book of Daniel. Now, then, that's the part we all love. And that's the part where everybody gets to and goes, okay, next we'll study the book of whatever. But Daniel 7 through 12, Daniel's visions. And we are in totally different atmosphere now. When we are in these chapters, we are in a totally different atmosphere. We go from like third person to now first person. Daniel himself is receiving these visions about the future. And so, all of these visions are basically emphasizing that God is sovereign. He knows, He discloses, He rules, and He's guiding history. The thing that I want to point out is in these visions of the future, there are, and chapter 7 is really the key to the book of Daniel. You know, I know that's not part of the first part that everybody knows so well, but it is really the king, or the key to the book of Daniel, because what you have is this very important messianic prophecy. In fact, two of the most important messianic prophecies are found here in this section of Daniel's prophecy. And one of them here in Daniel chapter 7 is, you've got a picture of God here, and he is called the Ancient of Days. And he is here enthroned as the Ancient of Days, sovereign over everything. And he judges because he is the sovereign Lord. He is the Ancient of Days. And he takes the authority and the power from all of these arrogant beasts. And because before this, you've got like 4 beasts quarreling. And it kind of goes back to chapter 2. You had the 4 kingdoms there. And now you come over to chapter 7 and you've got these 4 kingdoms. And remember, God's kingdom is going to supplant all of these other kingdoms ultimately and never end. And so God takes the power from all these arrogant beasts there, and he prepares to give all authority to another. And so what it's showing is that God is timeless, and that he is older than days. He is the Ancient of Days. He is timeless. And he endures forever. Unlike all these earthly rulers who are so arrogant, yet they're all passing, but God rules forever. And so he's going to give all of his authority to another, one who is like a blank of blank. Do you remember what it is? Son of Man, that's right. He gives all of his authority to one who comes before him as a Son of Man. And that's going to be really important because, of course, who's going to refer to himself as Son of Man? Yes, Jesus is going to refer to himself as Son of Man. And the whole idea is the title, you'll find Son of Man in the book of Ezekiel, which is going to represent humanity in the book of Ezekiel. But then you come over to Daniel, and Son of Man represents deity, this one like a Son of Man who comes before the Ancient of Days and receives all authority. So you got all Son of Man humanity, Son of Man deity in Ezekiel, now Daniel. And so the whole idea, the whole title of Son of Man was humanity and deity. The God-man. And that's exactly what you have in Christ. And that's what you have as God gives all authority to Jesus Christ. And we're going to see that authority, of course, we get into the New Testament. And Jesus declares that, of course, in the Great Commission. All authority has been given to me. Absolutely. Daniel prophesied it in Daniel chapter 7. Let's just summarize it now and get to our lessons. The book of Daniel's view of history. Well, I'll tell you what. We'll mention these things in our lessons. So let's just skip to the lessons. All right. If you're in your notebook, page 148, there you have your lessons, as you do from every lesson. And I will tell you what goes in these blanks, of course. The fill-in-the-blank answers are at the end of the lesson. But let's take a look at these. The first lesson from Daniel. 2 blanks. First blank is faithful. The second blank is supreme. The lesson's this. As we read the book of Daniel, the faithful will never be promised an easy life until God reigns supreme. The faithful will never be promised an easy life until God reigns supreme. Well, you might say, God's reigning supreme now. No, God is the supreme sovereign. That's true. But God is not reigning supreme. When he's ready to, he will. But for now, he's not reigning supreme. Most people reject him. Many people reject even his existence, and they reject his lordship, and they want nothing to do with him, and they're going to do their own thing. No, he's not reigning supreme. He reigns, and he is sovereign over everything, but the time is coming when he will reign supreme. But until that time, the faithful are never going to be promised an easy life, and that's what you see as you watch Daniel. And even you can't even get to a position of power and avoid the consequences that comes from serving God in a hostile world. Daniel was just as high as almost you can get. He was just, the only thing he could get that was higher was king. He was loved and trusted and served honorably and faithfully, and he still suffered. He still was persecuted. And so the faithful will never be promised an easy life until God reigns supreme. Just accept that. You can't be nice enough and you can't be kind enough. Now, we need to be as nice as we can and kind as we can. But the fact of the matter is, if you're thinking, well, if I handle myself properly, then, I can dodge persecution. No, you can't. So that's the first lesson. Second lesson, one blank. The blank here is the word future. God will remain the Lord of the future, and he will rule the future, even as kingdoms continue to emerge and exalt themselves on earth. There will be kingdoms, they will come and they will go, as all kingdoms have. And as they emerge, no matter how strong they appear, no matter how invincible they appear, God is the Lord of the future. Those kingdoms won't. They're not. They're going to eventually go the way of all things. Only God is the Lord of the future, and only God is going to rule the future. Well, I guess you mean by that, like every country but America. America will always be here. Oh, America will, yeah. That's what you mean, right, Dan? Oh, no. I'm sorry. There will come a time. If God delays his coming, there will come a time. The continent will be here. People will live here. But as a nation, an independent sovereign entity called the United States of America, I have no doubt. I have no doubt that if Jesus delays his coming long enough, there will come a time it won't be here. Kingdoms come and kingdoms go. Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, they come, they go. God is the God of the future. He's the ruler of the future, and he will rule the future. Kingdoms come, kingdoms go. The third lesson, third bullet statement here, you got two blanks. First blank is protect, second blank is saved. As we read through the book of Daniel, what we see over and over again is God has the ability to protect and save his people. Wow, I'm telling you what, there are no two more memorable moments of deliverance. No. Nebuchadnezzar was right in chapter 3 when he said, he hadn't made any commitment to God, Nebuchadnezzar, at that point. And it wasn't, at the end where, after Nebuchadnezzar went mad and then finally declared, God rules. But at the end of the whole fiery furnace thing, Nebuchadnezzar was right when he said, yeah, nobody can do that but your God. Nobody can do that. That's why we can trust God so much. All of this work in human history is to show us over and over again that God can do what he says he's going to do. He says, I'm going to save you. I'm going to save you. I can protect you. Yeah, but from what? Anything. Yeah, but from what what really is the thing you can't save from? No, nothing. Anything. And that is one of the great lessons of the book of Daniel. God has the ability to protect and to save his people, and he will. The fourth lesson here, fourth bullet statement, there's 3 blanks. First blank is the word humble. Second blank is the word proud. And the third blank is the word humble again. God will humble the proud, and he will lift up the humble. That's it. We see that here, whether it's Belshazzar drinking arrogantly from the vessels of the temple, praising the gods of silver and gold and wood, and or Nebuchadnezzar taking all of the credit. Look what I have done, as he looks at Babylon. No, God will humble the proud, and he will lift up the humble. Those who recognize that he is the sovereign ruler and he gets credit for everything. Nothing teaches that so vividly as the book of Daniel. Okay, the fifth lesson here, fifth bullet statement, you got 2 blanks. First blank is the word faithfulness. Faithfulness. And the second blank is the word hostile. Hostile. God still expects covenant faithfulness from his people, even if they are living in a hostile culture. Doesn't matter where we live, God still expects covenant loyalty. He still expects it. We still are called to obey God, and it is so beautifully illustrated again in the book of Daniel, as clear as any place in the entire Bible. You've got these exiled young men who are like, no, I'm going to be faithful to God no matter what it costs me. No matter what. Even my life. I mean, not just, it wasn't just a job at stake there. It wasn't just, losing some friends here. It was the ultimate cost. Yeah, well, I'm still serving God. And God's not only describing them, God's saying, this is what I want from my people. This is what I expect from my people. Covenant faithfulness, even if we're living in a hostile world. Okay, the next bullet statement there, 3 blanks. We've really basically already described this, but first blank is kingdoms. Kingdoms. Second blank is world. And the third blank is transient. We're just reminded. No need to take any extra time with this. I already described it. Kingdoms of the world are at best transient. Don't surrender to the world. They're at best transient. Next one. 2 blanks. First blank is wisdom. Second blank is power. God alone possesses wisdom and power, and he alone reveals it to people. I just love that story about the king's dream, troubling dream. Tell me what it is and what it means. Well, nobody can do that. But yeah, God can. Only God has that kind of wisdom. And only God has the power to do what he revealed in that dream. God alone possesses wisdom and power. All right, next bullet statement. 1 blank on this one. The word victory. Ultimate victory is certain. It is certain. God will triumph effortlessly, and he will bring salvation and deliverance to everyone who puts their trust in him. It is effortless. God will bring victory. It was effortless for God to rescue Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It was effortless for God to stop the mouths of lions. It's effortless. It was effortless for God to drive the most powerful king on the planet to his knees and start acting like an animal. It's effortless. Victory is not uncertain. victory is 100% guaranteed. And the book of Daniel expresses that beautifully. Next to the last lesson here, one line, one blank in this bullet statement, and it's the word presence. There is no place we can escape God's presence. It doesn't matter where we're at. It doesn't matter. In lions' dens, in fiery furnaces, in Babylon, in Persia, in Judea, it doesn't matter. We can't escape God's presence. God is sovereign, and He is present everywhere, and He is powerful everywhere. Finally, the last lesson here, two blanks. First blank is the word faith. Second blank is the word compromise. Hold fast to your faith. It kind of summarizes all these other lessons. Hold fast to your faith in God no matter what. Don't compromise with the world around you. We as God's people are called to be countercultural, and nobody demonstrates that quite like Daniel and his three friends. They were countercultural. Now, they lived there. They were interested in the well-being of the city there, just as God told them when He sent them into exile. He says, build houses, plant gardens, seek the well-being of the place that you live. They served honorably, they served with integrity, but at the same time, they were absolutely faithful to God no matter what. And if their service demanded that they compromise with the covenant loyalty, they were not going to do that. They had limits, and we must be the same way. All right, there's just some key passages from Daniel that you can look up on your own, and you can jot down there on the side, right-hand side of the page where you got some line notes, some observations, some thoughts from those passages. And we got about 2 minutes. Questions, comments, observations from this wonderful, wonderful book. Okay. Well, going once, going twice. Let's drop the gavel. Have a wonderful afternoon. We've got 2 lessons left, 25 and 26. And so we will, the next one, by the way, if you want to read ahead, and if you're keeping up with your reading or audio as you're going through this, Ezra and Nehemiah is next. Coming home from exile and captivity. Ezra and Nehemiah. So that'll be next, and then our last lesson will be 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Have a great rest of the afternoon. See you tonight, Lord willing.